Good evening and welcome to the news at 10. State Minister for Media Affairs and Government spokesman Mohammed Momani reiterated Jordan's unwavering stance, calling for a political solution to the Syrian crisis. As the crisis enters its 8th year, he said, a political solution is the only path to end it in a manner that guarantees Syria's stability, territorial unity and security. Momani added that the continuation of violence in Syria would lead to more conflict, killings, destruction and displacement whose victims are the Syrians. The government statement came in light of US-led strikes in Syria overnight, which the United States said had successfully hit every target and were aimed to deliver an unambiguous signal to the Syrian government and deter the future use of chemical weapons. US, British and French forces struck Syria with more than 100 missiles in retaliation for a suspected poison gas attack in Douma last week. Russia said that Syrian air defenses had intercepted 71 of the missiles fired.
This was a joint assault on Syria. French and British warplanes playing a key role in the strikes early Saturday. French President Emmanuel Macron posting video and this picture on his official Twitter account, showing him surrounded by staff in the Elysee Palace's version of the White House Situation Room. France unleashed 12 cruise missiles, fighter jets and warships during the attack. Macron took a firm line against Assad and his allies, even before Saturday's action, giving an interview to French TV to say he had proof of Assad's use of chemical weapons. His government also justifying the attack by releasing its own intelligence report based largely on open sources. It concluded there was no other plausible explanation than a chemical attack coordinated by the Syrian regime. And France's foreign minister warned if the red line banning the use of chemical weapons was crossed again, there would be another intervention.
Further humanitarian suffering.
The Western missile attack on Syria was right and legal. Britain's Prime Minister echoed President Macron.
This must be stopped.
Theresa May suggesting there was no choice but military action. Britain launched 4 Tornado jets from its base in Cyprus overnight. May, like Macron, issued the strike order without approval from her parliament. She's set to face them on Monday. Germany, meanwhile, supported but chose not to join its European allies in the attack. It's now calling for renewed efforts to find a peaceful solution to the crisis. Meanwhile, in Washington, Trump thanked his allies, calling it a perfectly executed strike. Mission accomplished were his words.
And just a while ago, the United Nations Security Council failed to adopt a Russian-drafted resolution that would have condemned the aggression against Syria by the US and its allies in violation of international law and the UN Charter. Only Russia, China and Bolivia voted in favor of the draft resolution. 8 countries voted against the draft, while 4 abstained. During the emergency meeting at Russia's request, the United States and its allies traded barbs with Russia, the latest in a bitter war of words over a suspected chemical weapons strike in Douma. U.S. Ambassador to the UN Nikki Haley warned that President Trump had told her that the U.S. was locked and loaded if the Syrian government mounted another chemical weapons attack. Vasily Nebenzia, the Russian envoy to the UN, sharply condemned the strike, saying that Washington's foreign policy is motivated by neocolonialism. He also blasted the US, France and the UK for proceeding with the strike without allowing an international chemical weapons watchdog to complete its investigation into the alleged attack. The Security Council meeting was the panel's 5th regarding Syria in the past week alone. So Damascus's residents were woken before dawn by a series of explosions resounding across the city. The missiles targeted 3 chemical weapons facilities, including a research and development in Damascus's Barze district and 2 facilities near Homs. Hours after the strikes, smoke was still rising from the remains of 5 destroyed buildings of the Syrian Scientific Research Center in Barze. There were no reports of casualties. The decision by the US president to launch airstrikes on Syria with backing from the UK and France has proved globally divisive, with some countries praising the military action while others condemned it as provocative and unacceptable. Among the strongest critics of the airstrikes were Russia and Iran. Russian President Vladimir Putin denounced the strikes as an act of aggression that would exacerbate humanitarian catastrophe in Syria. Putin added that the attack had a destructive influence on the entire system of international relations. Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei called the U.S.-led strikes on Syria a military crime. NATO chief Jens Stoltenberg said all NATO allies fully supported the Western allies' airstrikes on Syria. Meanwhile, China's foreign ministry called any military action that bypasses the UN Security Council a violation of international law, saying that a political solution is the only realistic way out for the Syrian issue. And UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said that while the use of chemical weapons was abhorrent and horrendous, he urged caution in retaliating, expressing concern that any escalation of the violence would only increase the suffering of those living in Syria. The U.S.-led attack on Syria took place even before the results of the fact-finding mission sent by the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, OPCW, were out. Hours after the strikes, inspectors from the OPCW arrived in Damascus on their way to the site of the suspected poison attack. OPCW said in a statement that the fact-finding mission will continue its deployment to the Syrian Arab Republic to establish facts around the allegations of chemical weapons use. The OPCW will determine whether chemical weapons were used, but will not assign blame. Jordan, alongside the Arab and Islamic world, marks the anniversary of Isra al-Mirage, Prophet Muhammad's nocturnal journey from Mecca to Jerusalem and his ascension to heaven. The Isra, followed by Mirage, was one of the miracles in the life of Prophet Muhammad. It happened on Rajab 27th, in the 7th month of the Hijri lunar calendar, in the 10th year of Muhammad's prophethood. On this occasion, His Majesty King Abdullah received cables of good wishes from senior civil and military officials. Cables came from the Prime Minister, the Acting Senate President, the Lower House Speaker, the Royal Court Chief, the Army Chief, and heads of security agencies. His Royal Highness Crown Prince Hussein also received similar cables on this occasion from senior officials. Senders of the cables expressed appreciation for King Abdullah's efforts in defending the Al-Aqsa Mosque and other Muslim and Christian sites in Jerusalem and countering Israeli attempts to Judaize the city. To sports, Britain's Jonathan Rea won race 1 in Aragon, Spain to extend his lead at the top of the Superbike World Championship. Kawasaki rider Rea took the line 1.4 seconds ahead of Britain Charles Davies, with Spain's Xavi Flores finishing third. The victory was Rea's second of the season, in which he is trying to claim his 4th title. And finally, for a quick look at the weather, pleasant spring conditions continue to prevail across the kingdom with temperatures above seasonal average. Amman tomorrow can expect a high of 25 degrees Celsius and a low of 11 degrees, while winds will be westerly moderate, picking up at times. Further south in the Gulf of Aqaba, it will remain hot with daytime temperatures at 34 degrees, dropping down to 20 at night. And with this, we come to the end of this edition of the news. I'm Ali Atuqan. Thank you for joining us and have a good night.